Morning, folks. How are you? Yeah. For those of you who were here last week, probably the two most prominent things you might remember from listening to Lex's preaching was the worm story. Do you remember the worm story? And the other one was Jeff acting as his inner conscience, convincing him that he needed a pet lion cub. So if you didn't hear about that, I encourage you to go back and go to our YouTube channel and listen to what Lex had to say, because we've been doing, like he said, this series of better decisions, fewer regrets. It's based on a book written by Andy Stanley. Now, Andy is he's the pastor of a very large church that he founded in North Point, is the name of the church in America. And so he's written this book, and then he has decided to also undersell himself by preaching about his series so people won't buy his book. I like it. The book was released in October last year, and I encourage you, if you are wanting to get even more meat out of this series that we're doing, to buy the book, to listen to it, so as we work through it. But the byline of this book is what interests me also. So, better decisions, fewer regrets. But the byline is this: 5 questions to help you determine your next move. What I like about it is it's not 5 questions or 5 keys to success, which if we could Google that, I'm sure we could come up with a list. Or it's not 5 steps to a trouble-free life. It's 5 questions to help you determine your next move. Now, the question that Lex looked at last week was, am I being honest with myself? Really? Am I being honest with myself? Really? Gives us the opportunity to question twice. Am I being honest with myself about this situation? Really? It stops us from doing that act now, act fast. Lex last week talked about the salesman that exists in our heads to say, do it now. Don't think about the consequences. Do it now. But by asking these 5 questions, it slows us down. It makes us pause and hopefully make a decision that is a better outcome, not only for us, but for those around us that it impacts. So the question that Lex looked at was the integrity question. Looking at when it comes to my purchases, my relationships, my habits, am I being honest with myself? Really? So our time together today, we're going to unpack the next question. And the question is categorised as a legacy question. But before we get to that, I want to tell you a story. See, Anzac Day for me is an opportunity to, yes, reflect on the significance of those who have fought in wars under the banner of Australia. But for me, it helps me to remember a story that I found out probably long after my grandfather, my opa, died. So I come from Dutch stock. That should be story enough. I don't know if you know someone who's Dutch. See Andy there, she's cheering, yeah! So people are like, oh, she's Dutch, far out. Don't worry, Andy, I'm with you. I'm with your sister. So I had an Oma and Opa. My brother used to call them Oompa and Loompa, but Oma and Opa. And when my Opa was a very stoic man, not much emotion beyond what I remember as a grump. I was a little bit scared of him, to be honest. He died when I was 13, but I was a little bit scared because he spoke funny. And when I went to their house, I got fed a whole lot of pearl barley. And I didn't understand what they were. Yeah. So when I read his story when I was about 18, his story came out of the fact that my mum had asked him, so his daughter-in-law, my mum had asked him to put his story down on paper, and he had been asked numerous times beforehand, no, I don't need to go there. See, he had emigrated from Holland when he was about 30-something with his wife, my Oma, and 1 child. But there was a whole lot of backstory that had happened there. You see, in World War II, he wasn't someone who was on the front line. He was part of the resistance. As a Dutch man with German overthrow happening all around him, he chose to be part of the resistance, the movement that was behind the scenes that rebelled against what the Germans were trying to do. I didn't know any of this until I read his story. And there's one significant thing that I remember from the story that I read that my mum put together. There was a situation where he was this close to being caught by German soldiers. See, he was the son of a nurseryman, someone who grew flowers, grew plants. And next door to them, their neighbour, was a man who made coffins. Yeah, nurseryman coffins. You can probably think what else goes along in the street. He had been hiding and running from the Germans because he'd done things like transferred letters, passed on illegal food passes. And I remember one thing he was saying, how for 2 weeks he had to hide in the forest and eat berries only. But this one time he was this close. The Germans were coming and they knew it. So the Germans knocked on the door of his house and they decided to go out the back door to the next door neighbours. But they knew that the Germans were going to knock just on the next house again, looking for Dutch people who were doing the wrong thing. The wrong thing. So, what do you think that they did? Yeah, absolutely. They went upstairs, the storage area of all the coffins that were made. They made the choice to go and hide inside the coffins. There's no one else in there. Inside the coffins. And it was only because of the young German soldier who went up to the attic where the coffins were kept. He got freaked out by the fact that there was a whole lot of coffins in the room. He went up there, looked around the room, all clear. He went and reported back to his captain, all clear, there's none in this house. This close. You see, I wasn't there. I didn't ever get to talk to my old pa about that. But that story has a massive impact on my life. He lived because of that, because of the choice that he made. He took his wife and their first child to Australia. They emigrated on the White Australia policy. And it's because of that that I'm here today. You see, folks, that's a legacy that passes down from my old pa. I wish I knew that when he was alive. I would have had a different relationship with him because of it. But the stories in our lives make an impact on the people around us. We can't rewrite the stories of our past. And I'm sure there's a number of decisions he made as a grandfather and a father that had ramifications on my family as well. But the stories that we write and the decisions that we make in those moments become part of not only our own story but others as well. Yeah? They're permanent parts of our story. Regret or no regret. They're permanent parts of our story. Whether they're a life-threatening decision like that one, do I die or do I hide in a coffin and hope that no one finds me? Or if they're routine, daily decisions that we make, they make a permanent impact. So our question that we're adding to our 5 today is, what story do I want to tell? I can tell the story of my grandfather, but what story do I want to tell? Carissa, I was so encouraged this morning when you were able to stand up here and say, the story I get to tell is, I am set free from depression. Because the decision that you made, Carissa, was to turn up, to act on an invitation to come here. And that story is a story you get to tell. Yes, the other chapters that have happened before are part of your story, but what a celebration it is that this chapter you're in now is a result of that decision that you've made. And it doesn't only impact you, does it? It impacts Milan, it impacts the generations after you. Absolutely. Pardon? I like it. Yeah, so do I. I like it a lot. We love to tell stories, don't we? And Andy, I don't know about you, but Dutch people love to tell stories about other people in their family, especially if it makes other people laugh. Women in the room, if you've given birth, you know that women love to swap birth stories. There's this unwritten rule that if you're talking to a woman who hasn't had birth, you're not allowed to tell them the gory details. Just ask my mother when she said, actually, I wasn't going to tell you all that part. But women love to swap birth stories. Now, my kids also love to tell their own birth stories. Yes, they were there, but, they have no memory of it, but yes. But they love to tell their birth stories. Eleanor loves to share. They nearly dropped me, I came out so fast, she says. Jasmine loves to tell the part about she didn't breathe for the first 3 minutes. And Archer, the other day, I caught the kids, they were brushing their teeth. And the girls said to Archer, they must have been comparing belly buttons, right? The girls said to Archer, Archer, how come you got an outie belly button? And he says, well, remember, I did come out the right way, not like you girls. I was like, it's not how it made. But I just love that that is part of their story. That part that was my story gets passed on to them. And that happens as well with everything in our days, in our weeks, and dramatic moments in our lives. But the thing is that the low times and the hard times that are going on, they're part of our story as well, aren't they? That even when we're in the valley, as the Bible talks about, that those moments and the decisions we make in those moments still impact our story. Now, I'm acutely aware that not only the big life-changing decisions that I make, but the daily decisions that I make impact not only my life, but the life of my children. One of the things I really appreciate, Lex, about when you preach is that you're honest. And I'm prompted today, as I've been looking at preparing what I'm going to say, is that it's important to be honest. I like to joke that parenting has a buffer factor. So I don't remember anything before kindergarten. I reckon by the age of 4 was the first solid memory I have, and it was my kinder teacher wouldn't let me peel my own apple. Yep, solid memory. And I sort of joked that, well, I've got at least 4 years of my child's life before they're going to remember anything. 4 years of buffer, right? But if I'm true with myself, the decisions that I've made on a daily basis as I parent have already impacted my children, even if they don't remember it. And the decisions I've made because of the emotions that I feel, they've made an impact on my kids. And here's the thing. Daily, I have had to acknowledge that I have an issue with anger. I didn't think I did before I got married, but that was because I didn't have anyone in my emotional circle that impacted me. I could step away. I was my own person. But having been married and having had kids, I've had to acknowledge that, yes, anger can drive a significant amount of my decisions in those moments because I feel justified. I feel like, and I hear you nod, I feel justified that the choice that I want to happen has to happen. But if we make our decisions, friends, if we make our decisions based on the biggest emotion that we feel at that time, likelihood, end in regret. And if I habitually make decisions based on my anger, and I will own to you, I still fail. But I, by the grace of God, know that if I make decisions and pause when I feel that emotion, I'm going to have fewer regrets. Yeah? Now, the sad thing about when I look at my story in the last 10 to 12 years is I've taught my kids how to be angry. Because even though they might not remember it before the age of 4, I've taught them how to respond badly in situations when it's not going their way. But just like we get to not rewrite that past, I get to look at this part and rewrite this better and write this part better. The chapter I am in now, I get to write. Does that make sense? I can't rewrite that, and that is part of my story. But I don't want to hide that part of my story. I don't want to skip over that chapter. I want to redeem it. And so I make choices each day. I want you to have a think. What's possibly the worst decision that you've made? And when you think about that decision, what was the primary emotion that was at that time and place? I can guarantee you it was a big one. Was it lust? Was it fear? Anger? Pride? Jealousy? Each of those decisions, when they dominate the situation that we're making, each of those emotions, when they dominate the decision we're making, it's going to lead to regret. So to throw a psychologist term at you, and I know Lex did that last week, he talked about a certain bias, confirmation bias. I'm going to throw another psychology term at you. It's called focalism. It's the idea of tunnel vision. If I'm in a situation and I'm making a decision based on the biggest emotion that I can feel, all I feel is that emotion, and I'm looking at everything through that tunnel of that emotion. So if I'm making my decisions based on anger, I'm going to feel highly justified. That person, I don't deserve to be treated like that, or I don't deserve to have this happen. And anger drives my decision. But if we pause, friends, if we've got the capacity to pause, acknowledge that emotion, then we can make a better decision. We don't look through the situation just through the lens of that emotion. Does that make sense? Yeah? Sorry, I'm being very heavy, but it's important to understand. Now we're going to have a dig into the Bible. We're going to look at the story of Joseph, not Joseph, Mary and Jesus, but Joseph in Genesis. You might have heard of Joseph and the amazing Technicolor coat, yeah? Rainbow coat that his dad made for him. You might be really familiar with the story. And prior to having a look at it through the idea of decision making, I would have said the story was about God will be with you wherever you go. Multiple times if you read it, and we pick up on Joseph's story in Genesis chapter 37, multiple times the writer of Genesis says, and God was with him, and his favour was upon him. Yeah? So we could say, God should be with me if I believe in Jesus, and if I trust God, he'll be with me. But actually, we can look at Joseph's story based on better decisions. We can look at some key chapters in Joseph's life and realise, hey, I've got something to learn from this. Joseph was a 17-year-old boy. Handsome, strong, 11th of 12 boys, and the favourite. You see, Joseph's situation, his story, was already impacted by the people around him. I'm not sure where that's coming from. Someone's random bag. So Joseph's story was already impacted by his dad Jacob's decisions. Jacob decided that he was going to have a favourite because Joseph was born from his favourite wife. Doesn't sit well, does it? Joseph already had a life that was impacted by his dad's decisions. But we're going to see how Joseph and the decisions that he makes means he has direct impact on his story. So, 17-year-old Joseph, quite spunky. So he actually talks about his handsomeness in this story. His dad tells him to go and find his 10 older brothers and see what they're up to. Those brothers were afar looking after the sheep. And he's sent to go and see what they're up to. And here's where the first chapter of Joseph's story happens. His brothers see him coming and make a decision amongst themselves because of the hatred that they already have for Joseph, and it talks about that. They decide, this is it. We're going to kill him. We can't stand it that he's Dad's favourite. So many decisions that they've made themselves that build bitterness up in their hearts. Time to kill him. So they figure they can kill him, lie about it, say that some wild animal must have killed him, and finally get rid of the thing that they see is the issue in their lives. Not here, but they think Joseph's the issue. Now, one brother, Reuben, the oldest, says, no. Why kill him when there's something we can do that's different, that won't look so bad on us, that won't sit with us? Let's just stick him in this really big cistern here, a well, thankfully empty of water. Let's stick him in there, let him die in there, then his blood isn't on our hands, and we'll just tell Dad that a wild animal got him. So then Reuben disappears off the scene, and while Reuben's disappeared, the other 9 brothers say, actually, if we're going to get rid of him, why don't we make some money from it as well? Some slave traders come by. Why don't we sell Joseph, get some cash, get rid of Joseph, and things will be a whole lot sweeter. So this is what they do. They sell him to the slave traders who are going to Egypt. They take his coat from him, and I imagine it wasn't just can we have your coat, please? Oh, sure, no worries. There would have been a fair bit of, you know what boys are like. They dip it in some goat's blood, that they kill a goat, and they take it back to Jacob, their dad. Joseph's taken with slave traders. You can see, not a great chapter for him, is it? He's the favourite, not by his own doing, and he gets taken to slave traders. Jacob, their dad, he weeps with grief. Weeps that his favourite son is gone. Great decision by the brothers? No. Driven by the emotion of bitterness, that they saw that Joseph was the issue, not the fact that it was going on here. Mind you, Joseph might have had an impact that he told them about some dreams that he had where he was the standing up bundle of wheat and they were all the lying down, bowing down to him bundle of wheat. Yeah, didn't go down well. Needless to say, the process happened that he is now off to Egypt with slave traders. His brothers hold on to that lie, knowing that they've gotten rid of their brother and they think that everything's going to be fine. That lie is going to stay with them for years. Now, it still talks about the fact that the Lord is with Joseph in this story, and he gets sold to Potiphar. Potiphar is the captain of the guards. He is one of the chief executives of Pharaoh, the god of Egypt, essentially. Pharaoh thinks he's himself a god. And the Bible in Genesis talks about God is with him, and Potiphar realises just how valuable Joseph is, and basically everything that Joseph does ends in success. And Potiphar gives more and more responsibility to Joseph because he realises just what a good asset he is to him, till the point where the only decision Potiphar makes in his day is what he's going to eat. Every other decision is given over to Joseph. So what could have been a horrible situation, wanting to be killed, sold, brothers wanting to kill him, sold to slave traders, could have ended up in a horrible situation. He's actually done quite well, don't you think? And then comes another chapter of Joseph's life. Potiphar's wife notices, after a couple of years, how handsome and how rugged and how much eye candy Joseph is. And she makes a decision based on her emotion of lust, that she wants Joseph. Now, I want to pick up and read a specific thing because this is really key. We get to look at the decision that Joseph makes in this scenario. Joseph's got a choice. He can either say yes to Potiphar's wife, and it could go well with him, or it could end really badly, as Potiphar finds out. He can say no to Potiphar's wife, and it's not likely to go well at all. Of 4 options, one might work out. Potiphar's wife keeps her mouth shut, and he's sorted. Here's what Joseph does. And in this decision, he pushes pause on his story. And what I love about this is he verbalises to Potiphar's wife the decision that he's made and why, and calls her on it as well. If you want to track with me, I'm in chapter 39 of Genesis, verse 8. She says, she demands, "Come and sleep with me." Now, I'm sure there is a tussle going on in Joseph's heart. But Joseph refused. And he verbalises the decision that he makes to her. "Look," he told her, "my master trusts me with everything in his entire household. You see, he's going with the rational brain. He has held nothing back from me except you. Because you're his wife. Duh. How could I do such a wicked thing? It would be a great sin against God. You see, Joseph had the sense to pause and realise that everything he had in front of him was because of was upon him. He shouldn't have been the chief guy of the captain of the guards. He was a slave. And yet he made the choice to say no in a situation full of temptation. So do you think it goes well for him there? No. And this is what I think I want us to remember. Better decisions don't always end up in fantastic success. Better decisions end with fewer regrets. You see, when Joseph decides later to tell this part of his story, he could have chosen to skip that part because he wasn't proud of it. Yeah, actually, I decided to go with Potiphar's wife, but I don't want to talk about it. Or, I said no, and it didn't end well, but I chose to say no. And here's what happens. She keeps pressing. She gets his coat and she's like, this is not going to work out well for me. I'm going to lie. She declares, Joseph has raped me. And look, he fled because he knew it was the wrong thing and I have his coat. What does Potiphar do? Potiphar is furious because he believes his wife. Potiphar is furious and sticks Joseph in jail, regardless of how many times Joseph has proven himself that he is trustworthy. This guy, because of the good choice that he made, the better decision, it lands him in jail. But I can guarantee you, when he's sitting in that jail cell, he's not regretting the choice that he made. But it's not pretty. We don't know how many years he's in that jail cell. But because of the decisions that Joseph makes and the favour of the Lord on him, and it talks about that, he ends up being chief helper of the guy who runs the jail. And the situation improves for him. Yeah, he's in a jail, but he's in charge of all the prisoners. And lo and behold, in that time somewhere, 2 of Pharaoh's servants end up in jail. They've offended Pharaoh. His cupbearer and his baker. I have no idea what they did to offend Pharaoh. They probably looked at him funny. But we probably woke up with a headache and decided to punish the first 2 people that he saw. But they've ended up in jail. And Joseph is in charge of them. And while they're in jail, they both have a dream on the same night. And they tell it to Joseph. And he has the guts and makes a decision right there and then because God has given him the gift of interpreting dreams. He makes the decision to actually tell them what he knows is God means by those dreams. He could have kept his mouth shut. And he tells them, cupbearer, your dream is actually going to end well for you. You're going to end up in 3 days' time back in Pharaoh's palace. Baker, you're going to end up impaled on a pole and the birds are going to eat your flesh. And Joseph was right. 3 days later, cupbearer by Pharaoh's side, happy birthday to Pharaoh, the baker gets impaled. But here's the thing that Joseph does just after he tells them their interpretation of the dream. He says, cupbearer, when you're back there, remember me. Tell Pharaoh I was the one that knew what the answer to your dream was. Cupbearer forgets. Until 2 years later. So Joseph is in the jail, working in those conditions for a long time. 2 years later, Pharaoh has a dream. It disturbs him because he has one dream after the next. 7 healthy cows, 7 sick cows eat the healthy ones. 7 good full bundles of grain, 7 really rubbish bundles of grain. These ones eat those ones. Whacked dreams if you don't have the interpretation of them. He gets every single wise man in his realm, every single magician to come and tell me what these dreams mean. He's really disturbed by it. And then the cupbearer goes, oh, I know a guy, and has the guts to say to Pharaoh, there's this guy that told me that I would be back here out of jail and things would go well for me. There's this Hebrew guy in the jail. How about you try him? So Joseph gets dragged out of the jail area. They give him a shave, change of clothes, probably still smells, to be honest. And he comes before Pharaoh. Pharaoh says, I hear you interpret dreams. Tell me what my dream meant. Joseph says, I don't interpret dreams, but God, the God I serve, who I'm faithful to, can tell you what your dream means. And so, Joseph says, both of these dreams mean that Egypt is going to have 7 years of massive feast, grain in abundance, more than you can even count, followed by 7 years of extreme famine, so bad that you won't even remember the first 7 years. And then this is a part I really like about the decision that Joseph made as he took stock. I'll just find it. He then has the guts to say to Pharaoh, therefore, give advice to Pharaoh, right? Therefore, you need someone switched on and wise to run this system for you and put 20% of every day of grain for that first 7 years so that when it comes to the famine, you've got enough for all of the people in Egypt, for all of the people around Egypt. Pharaoh goes, you seem intelligent and wise. I'm going to make you essentially Prime Minister. You will have every power possible, young Hebrew lad. You will be the most powerful ruler in all of Egypt, just below me. You see, Joseph made a decision to step out of fear. He's in front of Pharaoh, friends. To step out of fear and choose the gift that God had given him of sharing what dreams meant. Yeah? He didn't choose to live in that fear and only see this situation through there. Now, the story goes on a bit further. Next chapter of Joseph's life. And this is the one that fascinates me because this is the one where redemption happens. 7 years of feast, 7 years of famine. All of Egypt is hungry. And all of the nations around Egypt are starving also. And Joseph's brothers, the ones that have been living a lie for the last 13 years, their dad, Jacob, says, go to Egypt. I've heard they've got grain. If we don't get that grain, we're going to die. And so they do. Joseph recognises them straight away. And to cut a long story short, rather than see it through the emotion of bitterness because of what his brothers did to him, he feels great grief, but he also shows massive forgiveness. He makes a better decision because he doesn't look through the lens of hurt, which I don't know about you, but I've made decisions based on hurt. Or decisions based on unforgiveness because I didn't deserve to be treated like that. He makes a decision based on the fact that these are his brothers and God has been with him. And in fact, he believes that God's plan all along was for this to happen. Every valley, every triumph, he knows that God was in that. And he makes the decision not only to forgive his brothers, but they become welcome with their families, with his dad and all of the families and all of the servants. It becomes a point where every single one of them get given a plot of land within Egypt. And he makes a decision to redeem the choices of others, knowing that he had the power to do that. Don't you think that is phenomenal? You see, folks, every decision we make on a daily basis or in the really big situations that we see before us has a consequence. And the same way that the daily decisions I make to not choose to govern what my kids do based on the anger that I feel, but the decisions that I make that are because of understanding my own faults or understanding where God is in a situation that I don't understand, every decision I choose to make, every time I choose to pause, acknowledge the emotion, and make the decision that honours God, I'm writing a story that I'm going to be excited to tell. Yeah? And we have that choice today as well. So I don't know all your stories, but I know that God knows. And God knows probably the story that he's put on your heart today that you need to have a chat to him about or have a chat to someone else about. And I pray that as you consider, not only am I being honest with myself, really, but what story do I want to tell? That we can then know that the decisions that we make will lead to fewer regrets. Will you pray with me? God, I thank you that you know every ounce of our being and you know what's on our hearts. God, you gave us emotions to feel, but you also gave us the command to love you with our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so I pray, God, as we consider today what we're prompted to acknowledge as decisions that we've made, and I pray, Lord, as we look at the chapters of our life that have already been written, and potentially the chapters of others' lives that impact us, that we know, God, as we go forth, that giving our decisions to you will lead in fewer regrets, God, and we commit that to you as we sit in that space today. Thank you, God, that you control our futures and that you're calling us to make decisions to follow you one move at a time. Amen.